Hello guys, so as you can see we're doing something a bit different on this channel. I'm going to be doing a series of videos on the best and worst stories from each Doctor. This will include the expanded media because you know how much I love the expanded media. I mean, my series is filled with obscure references to it, so you know a lot to enjoy. This is a series of videos that's been on my mind for a while now, and of course where else better than start than good old William Hartnell. The first Doctor, the man, the myth, and the legend that made it all possible. So without further ado, let's get into it. Feel free to skim if you wish to do so. So on to the worst ones. Galaxy 4. Jesus Christ, we're really starting off strong here, folks. Galaxy 4 has very few redeeming qualities. In fact, only 2. The Chumblies are cute, and the speech the first Doctor makes to the Real is not only iconic, but one of Hartnell's best. It really highlights just who this character is and what they mean to the universe, and the good they bring to it. Aside from that, Galaxy 4 is a misogynistic 4-part story with a dull-ass plot, the dreadful Dravins, who feel like the representation of man's fears when it came to the women's rights movement, or the 60s and 70s, and worst of all, the story plot's long. It only has enough story for a 2-parter, let alone 4 episodes. It's a very problematic story with very little to take away from it. This story was quite an infamous one for the production, since it was the first story to be produced by John Wiles, a man who became a pain in the ass for everyone involved, and tried his hardest to fire or replace those around him. The crew didn't like this story one bit. We started off this new relationship between cast and the producer with a bad one. And unfortunately, it led to Maureen O'Brien's end on the show as Vicky, which is a great shame. The censor rights. This one was unfortunately put on the list, not because it isn't bad overall, but because the first 2 episodes are actually really good and wonderfully atmospheric and alien. This is a story that would have benefited from being a 4-parter and not a 6-parter. Once episode 3 starts, the story becomes dull and uninspiring, a tired political thriller with not much to say or give. The Censorites are a fascinating creation, but that only makes it all the more tragic that there's not much to vouch for this one. Give the first 2 episodes a watch, and the rest? Well, it's up to you. Planet of Giants. This was another heartbreaking story to add to the list because the concept is a strong one. The TARDIS team is shrunk down and they arrive back on Earth only to find themselves smaller than ants and in the middle of a ghastly murder. It's a simple story with a fun idea, but despite me loving Lewis Mark's works and finding his Doctor Who stuff very underrated, this story did next to nothing for me. Episode 1 was enjoyable, and all the props are fun to behold. I also rather like the cliffhanger of the cat hovering over the TARDIS crew. But the truth of the matter is, there's nothing to say about this story. It's just the crew shrunk into miniature people and a cruel murder taking place. Direction and props aside, it's not very memorable, which is a shame. The Dalek invasion of Earth. Yes, I hear your boos, but let me explain. Now, first off, I'll confess I haven't seen this story in years. And while I love the iconic moments the story is known for, especially that ending with the Doctor saying goodbye to Susan, I've never been that enamored with this story. Terry Nation wrote a strong enough script that, funny enough, would be used for Doctor Who's first filming stint on location. My problem is less that the story is bad, but more so that the direction is some of the most abysmal, ill-thought-out directing in Doctor Who history. A strong script ruined by awful direction and poorly timed shots. It's a strong story ruined by a director who doesn't know how to direct something with the limits of Doctor Who. And considering how big the story is, it's very unfortunate. The Web Planet. Now I'll admit the Web Planet is a fun story. I think this is a story with some pretty good ideas, but is yet again failed by poor direction. The Zarbi, while the design is great and very fun, are annoying as fuck, with their constant chitter-chatter, which threatens to give you a headache. But I'll be honest, I much prefer them over the Menoptera, which is just kind of unnerving and a bit too cartoony for my tastes. I can understand the appeal for this one in the B-movie sense, and I do have to applaud the production crew for taking a risk for this one, considering how difficult it must have been to bring the script to life on such a meager budget. So with all that negativity out of the way, it's on to the good ones. The Celestial Toymaker. Now I confess this story would have been rather limited back in the day to the show's budget, and the fact they couldn't afford to redo shots if something went wrong. But the concept of the story is inspiring. It's playful, creepy, daring, and downright clever. I really love this story, yes. It's unfortunately racist with the design of the Toymaker's outfit, and obviously the unfortunate inclusion of the N-word, but the Toymaker still proves to be an intimidating villain that was such a nice breath of fresh air for the show. There's no wonder why they brought him back and expanded the media and the giggle. It also would have been nice to see old 60 on screen with him, but as we all know, things didn't pan out due to a hiatus. It's a strong and very imaginative story that's held back by the show's budget, which is why, funny enough, despite the uncanniness of the character designs, I much prefer the animation. It's so much more playful, imaginative, and daring in a way that the original could never have been. One of the very few times I prefer the animation over the original product. Ten Little Aliens. Stephen Cole decided to write a Doctor Who Space Marine story that is a delightful mix of sci-fi horror and Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None should never have worked, but it did. This is a disturbing, nightmarish feel horror story that's incredibly graphic, atmospheric, and downright haunting with a terrific mystery. Seeing the first Doctor, Ben, and Polly thrown in such a terrifying narrative is a big whiplash, but one that surprisingly works. Despite the darkness though, it's a very fun and engaging read, especially when it turns into a decide your own adventure story for a chapter near the end. Which sounds like it shouldn't work, but Cole manages to pull it in a way that actually suits the narrative. A brilliant story that no doubt sends shivers down your spine. The Crash of the UK 201. Jonathan Morris has written a heartbreaking, at times unsettling story that puts Vicky to the test. It's a sequel to The Rescue that deals with the tragedy of the UK 201 before its crash in a way that's incredibly timey-wimey. It's a daring time travel story that asks the question, if you could go back in time and prevent your family dying, would you? Which is a terrible question to ask and not easy to answer. This story tackles time travel in a way that is similar to Father's Day, but with a purely sci-fi setting where the Doctor barely appears. It's a story that's heavily focused on Vicky, alternative timelines, and creatures that feast off altered time. A heart-wrenching tale that will no doubt leave most of you in tears by the time it's over. The Witch Hunters. Steve Lyons, a deranged genius and one of the very best of the expanded media writers, decided to tell a heartbreaking pure historical about the witches of Salem, who were unfortunately executed and punished for crimes of witchcraft, crimes they didn't commit. This is a tale that explores the superstitious, harsh reality devised by man as a way to control women in a time of tension. It's a heartbreaking and brutally honest tale that doesn't pull any punches. The TARDIS team won big danger in this one, and I must say it's rather nice to see Susan's telepathic abilities make centre stage for once. Like it should have done in the show itself. It's a dark, gritty, and disturbing story that will pull at your heartstrings, threatening to pull them out with a harsh tug. It's a very human story that makes you realise just how evil we can be as a species. That's all I have to mention for the first Doctor. There's a lot of stories I love with this incarnation and very few I dislike. When I was younger, I didn't much appreciate this incarnation. I'll admit, when I was a lot younger, I didn't really appreciate this incarnation. But now I'm much older, I really love the pure, stronger angle of this era. And the character development of this incarnation. It's both exciting and invigorating to see this incarnation grow from a grumpy, selfish old man to a cheeky old trickster who grows to love not only his friends, but for life all around him. Become the Doctor we know. That's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I'll definitely continue on this series of videos. Thank you for watching and goodbye.